Education used to be an investment. Now it's a burden. Millions of people went to school thinking that it would open up financial freedom for them. Instead, it gives them financial burden. And when you talk to these people, realize that it's not about education, it's not about lack of knowledge, it's not about agency. They're doing everything they can to beat student debt, and they can't do it by themselves because they don't have enough money. I'm Naveed Iqbal. I'm the founder and CEO here at Dolr, and we get people extra cash for their student loan payments so they can build wealth.
I wanted to start out with if you could share just a little bit of background of how you launched the company, how you started building it, just kind of broad strokes on that.
Yeah, we started in September of 2019. I was very fortunate to have some time to really sit down and think about how I wanted to make a difference in this world. Uh, and there are two things that kind of influence that. One is my parents. My parents have always been entrepreneurs. And in particular, when I was younger, my dad, I remember he started one of the first farm equipment financing companies in East Africa. And he would always be on the road, and I wouldn't see him that often. And so I'd talk to him and be like, "Listen, when you're around, it's great, but like you're never here, man. Like, what's up?" And his answers to me were really interesting. I think he said, "Look, son, I'm addicted to helping people, and when we make money as a side effect of that, it's a wonderful thing." So, this is before the days of Google Maps or phones and stuff. So if he wanted to find a customer, he was driving down random roads, hoping there's a farmer at the end of that road who was interested. And I remember very distinctly during the holidays, we would get all of these postcards and letters. And the common trend was that it would be a family standing in front of the thing that he had helped them finance. So a tractor, for instance. And the note would have nothing to do with the tractor or farming. It would be all about opportunity. It'd be like, thank you, you have changed our lives. Our children are going to grow up in a different world because we have now this ability to do this thing, which we are good at, right? But nobody believed in us. Nobody gave us that opportunity, and you did. So, it was very, very heartfelt. And my father would get emotional. He would cry. And I'd be like, what's going on? It's like, look, we've made a huge difference. And we did nothing. All we did, like, they're doing all the work. They're making all the payments. All we did was present them the opportunity. So that's always stayed with me. And, unfortunately, but when I was 12 or 13, I fell in love with math. And then all I wanted to do in my life was get a PhD in math. And the only reason I wanted to do that was so that I could say I'm certified to produce new math. Like that was my goal. I have a certificate here, make new math. uh, so I did that for a better part of my adult life. Um, Graduated, and in between degrees, I think one smart thing I did was go and work in the real world. So between undergrad and masters, between masters PhD, I go and expose myself to what's it actually like in the real world. Like when you're an academic, things aren't the same. You're living in a bubble. So graduated, and there's lots of opportunity for me to go into academia. I had the most wonderful advisor, and so I could have chosen to be a professor or do a postdoc or stuff like that. But there was this nagging feeling, like I spent most of my adult life in this very selfish pursuit, purely for my own interest. But I wanted that thing that my dad had. I wanted that feeling that I've actually made a huge difference in somebody's life. As a first generation immigrant. By the way, I am officially a citizen as of 3 days ago. So uh,
Congratulations.
thank
Wow.
you. Yeah, thank you very much. But as a first generation immigrant coming to the States, and my co-founders, they're also first generation immigrants. We just all happen to be from Africa. We didn't have access to student loans. And so our families had to go through incredible hardship and sacrifice to put us through school. And we always used to be jealous of people with student loans. Be like, what a privilege. You can just go to the government, get a loan, go to school, get a job, and then start paying it off. We're like, holy crap. And then, we'd get upset with some of our friends. They're like, be grateful. Like, you're so privileged. Why are you complaining about this thing? How dare you complain about this? And, we were obviously looking at it from a very rosy picture because of the struggle that we were going through. The experience that people with student loans have was very similar to the experience we had. And this didn't really show up until, we all graduated from a very expensive private tech school, excellent tech school. We went to Florida Tech. Everybody got excellent jobs, making a lot of money right out of school. And our friends with student loans still complaining. We're thinking to ourselves like, come on, like at least now you should be grateful. But it turns out that just like us, right? Like we were broke. We made a lot of money on paper, but we were broke because we were sending money back home. We were supporting our parents, our grandparents. Our family made a huge investment in us, and we had made it, right? We did the thing, and so now they were. I don't want to say reaping the rewards because it sounds sort of bad, but they were enjoying it. They were sharing in our success. And then we're also supporting the future generations, right? We're sending money down the chain, helping our nieces, nephews, cousins, all of that. It turns out that the people we went to school with were really in the same position. They were doing the same thing. A lot of them didn't come from privilege. They came from very modest backgrounds. If it wasn't for student loan, that was the only choice they had. They couldn't have gone to school if they didn't have the ability to borrow. And their families weren't like super rich or anything like that. And they were doing the same thing. They made it. Their families were sharing in the success, sending money up the chain, down the chain. And so they weren't, and on top of that, they had this huge burden of student loan debt. So all of us were having to answer these awkward questions about why we weren't at a certain point in our lives that maybe people expected. Like, why haven't you bought a house yet? What are your investments looking like? What's your 401k like? When are you getting married? When are you having children? All of that shit costs money, man. Like it's very expensive, and it's a real consideration for a lot of people. It's when to do those things. When can I afford it? And when you're going into a relationship, especially like if you're trying to get married or have a partner, people think about the burden they're bringing to the table. Like, you know, are my student loans going to mess up my partner's finances? Is it going to inhibit our ability to take out a home loan together? Like stuff like that. It's very important. And so first we thought, like we're all scientists. We all have backgrounds in data. And so, we thought, okay, maybe it's because we went to an expensive tech school. This is a limited problem amongst people like us. So we spent basically the first 12 months exploring that question. We spoke to tons of people about their student loans. And it turns out it wasn't limited to us. It was everybody. Everybody's smart. Everybody is doing everything they can. Everybody understands how important it is to budget. Everybody hates that word because of the failure associated with it. Like no, everybody has failed at budgeting. Right? There's like maybe a few people here and there are actually like doing it well, but mostly people don't budget. And especially if you don't have money, nobody budgets better than a person without money. Because if you're trying to decide whether you're going to pay your electric bill on the 1st or the 15th, when are you going to pay these bills? Like you know your money in and out. Like forget about budgeting. Like it's a necessity. You don't have a choice. So at the end of all of these conversations, we realized that the answer was the obvious one. You could have told me this at the beginning, right? That people just don't have enough money. Hurrah! Like big reveal. Yeah, a massive reveal. But we were overjoyed because we knew the obvious answer was supported by strong hard data. It wasn't any of the things that people often point to. Oh, maybe they're not smart enough. Maybe you should have taken another degree. Right? Like these are the same people who tell you go follow your passion, and then they tell you maybe you should have studied something else. Yeah, a bunch of bullshit. And it was cash. The only thing inhibiting people from beating their student loans was cash. The fastest way out of debt is to pay it off. We all know that. And because of this absence of like people can't do it by themselves. They need help. And so, today the Supreme Court struck down Biden's student loan forgiveness program. And there are 40 million people who are going through a period of mourning for the next few days. Like it's that much of a loss. It's huge, right? So it's not about anything other than access to cash. Over the last 30 years, the cost of education has increased by 180%, and that's inflation adjusted, right? Adjusted for inflation is 180% more expensive to go to school. In the same period of time, early career wages have increased maybe by 15%. It's a massive gap, right? And so Dolr is filling that gap between the cost of education and what we earn today. It's not the same as when our parents went to school. It's not the same as when our grandparents went to school. For them, it may have been a very different environment where it was realistic to take a loan from the government, go to school, get a job, and then pay it off with 5 years, buy a house, start a family, do all of those things. But it's just so expensive now. it's so expensive that you can't. Right? Like it's literally holding people back. I personally know people on the Dollar platform who are in their 50s, in their 60s, and they have tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. And they've been paying for these are very smart people. Like they read all of the things that you would expect like a CEO to read, like from a bank CEO. They read the Financial Times. They subscribe to all of things. They use all of these apps. They're very smart. They're not uninformed. They just don't have enough money. And we're all human beings. We can't expect each other to live through 5 years of awful, right? Like the only way to do this might be, okay, I'm going to eat ramen noodles for 5 years. I'm not going to leave my house. I'm going to live in like the worst apartment. Like that's not a way for human beings to live. Like it's unfair to expect our fellow human beings to do that, especially like you're making $120,000 a year, and you can't afford to live a certain way. So, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we're so buried in credit. And so we realize that cash is the problem, and that's the problem that we're going to start attacking. So, that's how this whole journey started. Um, yeah, that was a very long answer.
No, that was an incredible answer because I think it will you've inadvertently answered a lot of my questions coming up, which I'll kind of go through, right? Because one of the things I talk to people about is how did you decide on your ideal customer? Well, because that's the whole point of this company, right? Is to serve that person, that type of person, or that person in that situation. But just in a nutshell, too, I just wanted to make sure that everybody clearly understands how that comes to completion. Can you just summarize like how the company actually helps them get cash and to pay off their loans?
Yes, absolutely. So let me start by saying that Dollar is completely free for the person with student loans. Anybody can come sign up and start enjoying the benefits of Dollar for free. Uh, we connect people with three extra sources of cash and one way they can make their cash go further. So I'll start with that one. I mentioned that budgeting doesn't work, right? And it's not just me saying this. Blackstone Financial Advisors did a study in 2019. They partnered with this savings app called Digit. The people who were participating in the study didn't really know that they were in a study. The question Blackstone was trying to answer is maybe there is a best budgeting strategy. Right? Maybe the problem is the strategy. And so when people would sign up for the app during setup, they were presented with a strategy at random, one of three. And then they tracked these people for a whole year. And at the end of it, they wanted to come and say, yes, here is the best budgeting strategy. Almost nobody was able to stick to a budget regardless of strategy. And the kinds of people that Digit advertises to are people who have some money, right? They have that flexibility to be able to do these things. They have a little bit of discretionary income to do this, right? They just need some help with habit formation. So it turns out that budgeting doesn't work for anyone. Nobody successfully does it, and that's it's so human. It's because we want to treat ourselves. Sometimes you have a rough week and you just want to go and have your like buy dinner, or maybe you buy yourself like a shirt, shoes, whatever, because you need a reward, right? We're human beings. What does work is automation. And so if you set up your automations, you're less likely to spend money you don't have. And so we help people automate their habits when it comes to their student loans, right? And we do things like make weekly payments instead of monthly payments, which changes the way you think about these things. So that's one. Then we asked ourselves who. So let me just back it up a little bit. Some like the question is why isn't college free? Right? Why is it not a public service? Turns out that a long time ago, somebody made the argument that a high school education benefits not only the individual, but all of society. And therefore, society should foot the bill. And then that same person or group of people made the argument that higher education benefits mostly the individual. And so the individual should bear the cost of that. That may have been true for like 30 seconds. Like it's just not the case. And when you look at the impact that people with higher education have, and this is supported by data, is not only are people with a college degree earning more, that means they're paying more in taxes, they're also far more inclined to be civically engaged, participate in their communities, give back. And they overall like raise the level of society. Like we pull each other up, right? It's not just for ourselves. We bring everybody with us, and that's as a collective. Right? So it's kind of odd to me that we're penalizing these people, for doing that. And let's just be real. You can't get a job without a degree. You just can't do that. So it's it's kind of a backwards argument. And so we believe our thesis is that all of society has an incentive to participate in student loan repayment, and it's not charitable, right? You're not giving anybody charity. You're getting a lot of value for that exchange. And the first person when you think about who has an incentive is the employer. Companies, since we called them companies, since the age of time, have had this challenge, right? Like, how do I engage, recruit, and retain people? And they have a clear incentive to participate in student loan repayment. And so we launched a student loan benefit, and we thought that we were the most genius people in the world because we had this amazing idea, right? Well, it turns out that we weren't the first people to think about it. And so we ate some humble pie, and we went back and did some more research, right? So we spoke with employers, like 2 employees, 5,000 employees, everything in between, above, whatever. And because now we were humble, we would start the conversation with, who is your student loan benefits provider? 100% of people did not give us an answer. They were like, who? 95% of those people did not know that such a thing existed. Like they were like, I can do that? Like what? The other 5% were members of organizations like SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, and they had read about it. They said, I know what it is. I've read about it. Uh, I couldn't name a provider. I don't feel like it's for me. It feels like it's for those big companies. This is a multinational benefit, right? And so lots of interesting learning there. One, if these folks have been around for the longest time, why isn't there a clear winner? Why can't you point and say that one is the winner? Second, why do people feel like it's not for them? And so we dug into that and we spoke with a lot of folks and continued to refine and iterate. And we were very fortunate, I think, we were able to accelerate our learning because the pandemic, right? Folks were We were all desperate for human connection and we just wanted to talk to people. And so even though people weren't buying at that time, they were very open with their feedback and their time. And so using that information, we built what our Dolr student loan benefits are today. Uh, and I'm very, very proud that we have an 89 NPS, which is freaking legendary, right? It's pretty great. And so that's one of the ways we do it. The other way we do it is like, who else has an incentive? If you look around, who advertises to you the most is national retail brands. Right? Everybody wants you to build loyalty. So whether it's this, Bullseye store or this other like shoe brand or whatever, everyone wants you to be loyal to them. Not only buy but keep buying. And to do that, they have all kinds of offers and deals, and they do cash back and loyalty programs. And it's very interesting is when we spoke to people, we asked them, when is do you remember the last time you earned cash back? And like, oh, I think I get it for my credit card. I couldn't tell you when. And that means they can't even tell you who. Right? It's like maybe I got $3 some, I don't remember. Maybe at the time of purchase, they were like, oh, here's a deal, and I'm the hero. The brand has nothing to do with it. And I'm the hero. I'm saving 3% or whatever. Brand has nothing to like the brand is just trying. Like sometimes it works, maybe a very short time. I thought, what an opportunity, right? These people are already doing this. They have a clear incentive. So we have a cashback rewards program where you just have to come to Dolr and link your credit or debit card. And then we do everything else. So you can go to one of our partners, like you forget about it, right? We want you to forget about it. And so when you go to one of our partners and you buy something, we will tell you in real time. So when you get your receipt, you get an email from us that says, hey, you just earned $3 cash back from XYZ brand, and we're going to get it into your student loan payments on this date, right? Or within this amount of time. So you've not done any work. You've just been living your life and you're paying your student loans, and you continuously see that the brand that's participating in that student loan repayment. with you. They're helping you beat your biggest financial burden. And that builds real loyalty, right? It builds an attachment, or at least, at the very least, it creates a memory. Right? It's like an association. So we're very, very proud about that. And so we took it to the next level because some people, when you're selling to the person who's not using it. So for instance, if you're selling to HR and they're not the person with student loans and they're not using it day to day, sometimes they ask like kind of dumb questions, which is good, right? It's a really good thing because it gives you an opportunity to educate. Oftentimes that just means that they don't know. But well, like what difference is $5-10 going to make? Well, it actually makes a huge difference. Student loans accumulate interest daily, every single day, and $5 can save you a few months in repayment. Um, but we wanted a better answer, and we wanted to do it in our own way, in our particular style. Dollar is all about community. And we thought, hey, what if I was earning cash back, but my whole community was also earning cash back on my behalf? So we call that our village. And you can get your family to participate, whomever. They go do their shopping. They're not giving you actual cash, right? But they're doing their shopping and you're earning their cash back directly to your student loans. So that's very rewarding. And then we also enable them to make one-off payments, or can they set up like a recurring, I'll give you $5 a month for your student loans. It doesn't have to break the bank, but it makes a difference. That's what's important. And it all adds up, right? And so that's 4 different sources of cash that we connect our people with.
Want to say that's amazing because you're attacking it from so many different angles. And one of the things I think of, a couple of things I want to unpack with you real quick. One is I love how you're describing that exploration period of figuring out how to attack the problem, and you were asking why. Why don't they already do this? Why don't they already understand? Why don't they have this in place? And I think that's something that's such an important habit, for not only launching a business or succeeding in business, but also specifically for the marketing side. It's asking good questions as opposed to just jumping to conclusions, which you kind of mentioned, like the humble pie, right? You thought, oh, well, we have this great idea, which it is a great idea. And it doesn't matter if other people have had it, right? Because you can do it differently. So I just kind of want to highlight that real quick. And the other thing is, now to get kind of in a tactical level, right? Like, okay, so now you've launched, you're building your customer base, and it's about how do you actually reach the people that you need to not only help or want to help, but also these partners and all these different stakeholders are going to help make that happen, right? So one of the things I think about is you almost have multiple customers, right? You have the end user, which is this person with student debt, the person who the mission is built around, right? But at the same time, you have to market to or sell to or reach, the actual companies, right? So employers. So that's a totally different segment. It's a totally different value proposition, and it's like almost its own thing. And then national advertisers with the cashback rewards, setting up these partnerships, that's its entire different thing, right? And then, you mentioned that there's like, people that are kind of ancillary stakeholders that might contribute. So this could be, I guess, family members or people that are connected to the person with the student loan. So can you walk us a little bit through kind of the tactical level of how you approach that? Like, I know that the mission kind of takes care of the big questions of who's your ideal customer because you're trying to help people with student debt, but maybe walk us through kind of how you approached the messaging, the outreach for reaching these different segments that support that.
There are 2 parts to this. One is we got very lucky. It became a topic of national discourse, and so everybody was already talking about it with the CARES Act, and that suspending student loan repayments for a period of time. So that was really helpful for us. The second is that it's relatable. All of the stakeholders you describe understand what it is. Like they know the problem. And when you show a solution, a way that they can participate in a way that is value additive for everybody involved, it's a no-brainer.
So just walk us through a little bit, like let's just focus maybe on the employers, so it's not too much at once. But can you share, like, how did you actually connect with them in general? What kind of, like, did you do straight selling to them? Did you have like more of a referral thing? Like, just kind of walk us through that process.
Yeah, I strongly believe that to start off, you must do your straight selling first because
Mm,
if you give control to somebody, like if they're selling on your behalf,
mm,
you're first of all, as an early stage startup, you're losing a lot of information,
mm,
feedback, contact. You're not understanding the people you serve. Somebody
yeah,
else is, right? And
yeah.
that that is a problem, I think.
Mm,
Um, so in particular, with employers, so we started selling this benefit at the height of the pandemic. And so the
mm,
question we had to ask ourselves is, who would buy this thing at this point?
mm,
And so that led us down a path where we found, folks who were still operating, folks who did have issues with recruitment and retention, and more importantly, is that they hired people with student loan benefit, like with student
mm,
loans, right? And so
mm,
a student loan benefit would make a big impact for their workforce, for their teams, and for
mm,
the company as a whole. And so once we identified that, then we learned how to speak those people's language, like in
mm,
particular, right? Like we said,
mm,
if it was maybe a particular role they were struggling with, we got really deep into how their business works,
mm,
what the struggle is, how each of these roles is impacting, like how the whole machine works together, and when one cog falls out, how that impacts the rest of things. And so that was, I think, very, very helpful for us, not only at the early days, but also as a means to understand other places where we can find success. And we did find a lot of success, at that stage, because even though repayment was suspended or frozen for a while,
mm,
these people, it was such a struggle for them that they
mm.
could point and say that, and this the bar keeps moving, right? Or it has moved six times with repayment. Like it's been resuming next month six different times, and so that was a little bit helpful in terms of creating urgency around the problem. But it was really about making sure that we understood who we were selling to, speaking their language, and then really demonstrating that there was an actual problem that Dollar was solving for them. It was all about them. It's like, this is how we're adding a lot of value. And there's some instances where it was the case where it's like, no, like, you know what, you're probably better off like not signing up with us unless you really, really want to, but it's probably not going to move the needle for you culturally or in a tool as a recruitment retention engagement tool, right? Like there are some instances where that's the case. Uh, if you, for instance, if you only hire people who don't have college degrees, but you want to put Dollar on the website and say we offer you, like, it's kind of useless. Like, why are you wasting time? Like, don't do that. Uh, so yeah, it was identifying a person who needed our help at that time, understanding them, speaking their language, and then just giving, 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 giving.
And to create, add a little context to that. Obviously, at the time of this recording, the employment landscape has shifted tremendously from 12 months ago, right? Where 12, 18 months ago, all I would ever see online is the great resignation and how hard it was to find people. And so companies were incentivized to really compete for talent. And then it felt like overnight, it was suddenly like 25% of this company got laid off. It's like, wait a minute, what happened? And so to your point of what you were saying, like, solving that problem, has that changed at all now, given the current landscape, or are companies still just as incentivized to have these kinds of programs?
You see, that didn't affect us at all because our philosophy is completely different outside of that. And here's why. We always tell people that competing on compensation alone, like salary alone, is unsustainable. Like, you cannot keep doing that. And that one of that you could argue that that was the cause of both things that happened, of like this whole great resignation situation, as well as the mass layoffs that happened, particularly in tech, right? It was kind of focused on tech. Uh, it's more than about just salary, right? It's people are paying very close attention to their benefits, and they will choose a job that has maybe a lower salary, but with better benefits. In many cases, and there's studies about this. I wish I remembered the number. I don't. But there is a definite trend where people evaluate the benefits as well as the salary when they make that decision. And so for us, nothing changed, right? We were still advising people on, like, this is how you should think about it. These are the things you should consider. And definitely competing on salary is not a good idea. Obviously, you should pay your teams well, but you can only keep paying, you know, fresh out of school people $600,000 a year for so long. Because guess what? The 5 year veteran is going to be like, they're making 600K. I should be making 6 million. You know, and then you run out of, like, you don't have any money and you don't have a business, and now everybody's effed basically. So it didn't change anything for us because of how we approach the problem.
And then just switching to also now thinking about the end user. I don't know if that's the right way to frame it, end user, but like when the people with debt that you're trying to help, the mission is built around. When you're reaching out to employers to support this, that I imagine that's more of a like, an outreach, an outbound kind of thing. You have certain accounts that you can go after and start that conversation. Where with that wouldn't necessarily work with trying to get users on the app or the platform, right? Was that something that you used like in an inbound, like mostly social media, right? You mentioned that there was this big dialogue going on, so you kind of lucky in the sense that this was already something people were talking about. Um, Give us maybe some broad strokes of how you were attracting people to the website to sign up in the first place to build that user base.
For the longest time, we weren't. We were very, very focused on reaching employers. Uh, and yes, we have a direct sales mechanism, but we also have some really incredible partnerships that help us reach more people. More recently, we have started looking at just providing value on our social. So it's very exciting. We've gone viral on TikTok several times now in the last 4 weeks. Millions of views of our content, right? So I am very much about adding value for people, right? Like, so when we do these things and we go viral on our TikTok, people say, "How are you monetizing?" I'm like, "That's a wrong fucking question. Like, you're asking the wrong question here. Like, this is why people don't trust tech. You're like, you make one shiny object, and then next thing you know, you're telling everybody, pay me, pay me, pay me, give me money, give me money. Like, come on. Like, this, it's an exchange, and you have to develop trust, and you have to show that you've earned somebody's money, right? Like, it's like, why are they paying you? And so we're from that perspective, we just want to keep helping people, right? Like, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of information in general, and so if we're able to condense and provide unbiased information to people, and also try to make it entertaining, then we've done our job, right? Like, it's one of the things we think about ourselves, like, so Dollar exists to make the world a happier, wealthier place, and you do that by uplifting people, right? Both of those things. You uplift people emotionally, you uplift people societally, and you uplift people financially. And so when we think about what we put on social, like, that's what drives it.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought it up too, because learning about this business now for the first time and putting the pieces of what the business model would be now makes much more sense when you're actually going and creating the relationships with the employers. By that nature, now you're reaching their employees, so you're getting your user base through that exchange as well. So that makes a lot more sense. And as we start to wrap up, I one thing that really strikes me about this conversation is how focused on the mission it is, and I like that you're bringing up with SaaS or technology companies how we hear that a lot, but there's a big difference between talking to somebody like yourself who's like you've dedicated the whole thing to this, right? And it's not just an afterthought that you throw on the website, right? For people that are listening who have they've built a business around their mission, around their passion, around the thing that they truly want to be able to help people with and make a difference with. I imagine that as you were building this since 2019, there's been things that have come up that are like the new shiny object that maybe you would have gone off to and try to do that instead, or the quicker money or whatever. Can you give some advice to people as we wrap up on how you stayed focused and how they can stay focused on the mission, even if it's taken a while to really build that momentum and that kind of getting to that tipping point?
I think the first thing I would say is your passion is your passion. Nobody else cares. Like it's none of their business, first of all, right? And if you're trying to gain success because it's all about you, then you're not going to get there. If your passion is about helping other people with their passion, then maybe they like how you're doing things. And if they don't, then you have to learn how to listen and adjust. So I think that's where like sometimes you can get a little bit lost is just because you're passionate about it, like nobody cares. Like everybody is, it's not a selfish thing. It's just like you're asking for an exchange, right? This is not like this is an enterprise. We are a capitalistic enterprise for profit. We exist because we want to make money. And we do that because we help people, right? Like it's a fantastic side effect. Uh, but that is somebody's hard-earned money, and you have to think about why they should part with it for you.
And I love how you're answering that. It's not just about what you're passionate about. It's about understanding how that actually makes a difference, right? Because a lot of people start businesses because it's something they care about. I mean, that's natural, right? But when it comes to actually making money doing it, which we have to do in order to keep the doors open, right? Uh, that has to translate into real benefits for people, into real change for people, into real shifts, and it can't just be from something that, oh, I'm so passionate about this. But I think you kind of answered it already. It's like focus on how are you serving their passion, right? And just to wrap up, like just one piece of advice you would give to somebody who's like, how do I translate that into something tangible that's going to relate to somebody where that overlap is? That's why this is called Red Thread, right? Red Thread Messaging Podcast. It's the sweet spot between the thing you're passionate about and the things that your customers are going to benefit from. So, any last word of advice on that?
I will defer to somebody much, much smarter than I am, who's much more experienced. He's a professor or was a professor at the Harvard Business School. I will send you a link to this after because I don't remember his name right now. But he uh, was tasked to do this exercise for a company that sold milkshakes. They wanted to sell more milkshakes. They had improved the heck out of the milkshake, fresher fruit, smoother blah, all of these. The milkshake product itself was magnificent. Sales were stagnant. They were the same, right? Like the sales didn't get better. And so his thought was that when we as consumers make a purchase, we are hiring that purchase to do a job. So, if I'm hungry and I buy a banana, I'm hiring that banana to do the job of satiating my hunger. And so from that perspective, they set a bunch of these milkshake locations and they first recorded like what's happening. They found people were going to they were buying milkshakes before 8 a.m. Like most of the sales were happening before 8 a.m. It was like I mean, you've heard this story, right? Like it was pretty incredible. And then they spoke to the people and they realized that these people were buying the milkshake to do a job, and that job was keep them occupied and full on a commute to work. Most of the sales were concentrated around places close to the highway. And I think asking like, what is the job this person is hiring my product to do is a really good way to think about it.